Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. I get to talk to some of the best people on the planet. Of course, I say that in the opening, but I really mean it. Some really cool individuals that are working to operate in a whole different way of life than we were brought up to believe. And one of these people is with me right now. Her name is Kate King. If you want to, you can go to theradiantlifeproject.com and you can follow right along with her and what she does and her bio and all that kind of good stuff. But she is, how to put this, she is been studying a better way of living for a very long time and has really delved deep into the whole process of what it is that she does. She is a artist, she's an author, she's an inspirational speaker. She does all kinds of stuff. And I want to welcome Kate to the show. How are you, young lady?
I am well. Thank you, Kevin. I'm so glad to be here with you.
I'm more glad than that because you are sensational.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk about all the things today.
Well, you know, one of the things now, keep in mind, I've interviewed, like 2,000 people. And so I've interviewed a lot of folks, but I haven't ever run across an art therapist. And I'm not exactly sure what that means. And so if I don't know, that means that somebody else in our audience doesn't know. So what is an art therapist?
It's a good question. So being as a licensed psychotherapist, and I earned a master's degree in art therapy, which is one of the qualifications to become board certified. So it is a very legitimate mental health treatment modality that uses art in the service of healing in a bunch of different kinds of ways. There isn't really a one size fits all type of art therapy, but there are two different kind of broad schools of art therapy, one of which is art as therapy, and the other is art as psychotherapy. So art as therapy is basically operating under the belief that creating art in and of itself, without any processing, without any analysis, is healing. And as though, we haven't all just doodled on the margins of our notebook for most of our lives, we know that it's healing. It helps us express anxiety. It helps us give our brain something to do so that we can focus. So I think most people know that creativity can be very cathartic and very sort of supportive for the nervous system and the brain. But then art as psychotherapy takes it a step deeper. That's what I've practiced over the past 17 years, where you do use some analytical tools, and it is used in conjunction with mental health treatment, with personal growth theory, to allow a person to have kind of like a back door into the psyche, where through their art, they're able to take what's going on inside and have an external projection of that on a piece of paper or a canvas, in clay, in sculpture, in graphic media arts on computers, and to be able to really engage with that art from a perspective of gaining insight, gaining awareness, and having a relationship outside of yourself with something that came from yourself. So is that a good starting place for?
That's a really good starting place. Does that mean that what you are doing is, as an example, if you have suffered a trauma and that you can create some art around that trauma to kind of get it out of your head and into the world, into a space where you can understand a little bit more about your feelings around it and how it came to be what it is?
Absolutely. So things like trauma and even prolonged mental illness, even if you're just sort of asking interesting questions, it doesn't have to be traumatic, but it can be very helpful for trauma survivors because there's a energetic in the body when we have different life experiences, and energy needs to move through us. And this happens, we see this in nature too, the way that if you have a pond of still water, the water gets kind of funky. But when you have smooth flowing water, you're allowed to have clarity. You can see to the bottom. It seems healthier. Our bodies are vessels like that. And so the energies that form inside of us when we have a traumatic experience can get a little funky if they don't move through. And so creativity, not just art, but also music and movement and different kinds of creative expression, can be like that flow. And it can help us access something that we call sublimation, which is when something becomes something else more meaningful. So a trauma can essentially sublimate through the creative process to become a really meaningful introspective tool for healing and for insight and for growth, while also regulating the nervous system and providing a creative release and providing really deep meaning that a person can feel proud of. And it's a form of communication too. So if they're with an art therapist like me, or if they're in a group, then the art becomes part of the conversation, and it can help us access parts of them that maybe they didn't know how to talk about, or maybe they couldn't talk about without the art as the vehicle into the self.
It strikes me you seem like a young person. Of course, from where I sit, almost everybody is young, but you have been in school like forever, and you've got lots of letters behind your name and stuff. What motivated you to go to school to learn what you're doing to begin to get a master's degree in art therapy, as a matter of fact?
I have always been very curious about the human mind and what makes people tick and what makes people do the things that they do. I had a lot of trauma in my childhood that kind of got me thinking, what is going on with these humans and with me as part of the system? And I was also a very creative child, and a lot of magical thinking, a lot of creative expression. There's a lot of artists in my family, so it felt like a safe modality for me. And so I kind of followed that thread through college. I pursued psychology and art as a double major. And about my junior year of college, I was started to think about the future and my career. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do with art and psychology? I don't know. And so I actually plugged that question into a Google search. And I had never heard of art therapy before. And the Google search delivered me with the actual master's program that I ended up going to at Naropa University in Boulder. And it's a transpersonal counseling degree, which is about where the psyche and the spirit meet. And art therapy is a facet of transpersonal counseling psychology, at Naropa at least, because art is inherently transpersonal. It can be a very spiritual process, and it helps us sort of transcend the moment and the experience of being human and connect us with something larger. So that's how I made it kind of through there. But it's been a long, very fruitful process of my own healing and growth, combined with gaining a lot of resources and skill sets and science and research to back up how powerful this work really is.
I had a moment when I was 42 or 41, somewhere in there, that I said to myself, why am I really here?
Mm.
What is my purpose? What There has to be more than what I've been told. Because what I was told was get a job, get the house, get the wife, get the kids, all that, but it wasn't satisfying. Did you have such a moment?
I think I always knew on some level that I wasn't going to buy into the narrative I was being sold by mass culture and society. In some ways, the path might look a little traditional for me because I did do some of the steps sort of as they presented. But I think that I always knew that I could actually chart my own path if only I believed in myself. And I got a lot of affirmation for that when I graduated from my master's program and I went into private practice, and people told me, starting your own business is really hard. Most entrepreneurs fail. A lot of therapists don't make it in
Yep.
private practice. And I just remember thinking, why would anybody think that way? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build this business and it's going to thrive. Like, what other option is there? It's just going to be that way. And so it was that way. So I think on some level, I had a sense of connection to the truth that I felt so strongly within myself, that I was co-creating this reality. And even though there are some of these really mass supported belief systems and cultural implications for what it is like to be an adult, I just don't know that I drink that Kool-Aid.
Well, I'm glad you don't drink that Kool-Aid, because your gifts are substantial, and your desire is to help people understand how they can live their life more completely and better and more fully, and, like I say, have the adventure of a lifetime.
Thank you.
And you do that. And but I'm just struck by the fact that most people have got these epiphanies, that they have experiences, and then they grow, and then they think, and then they do this and that, and then they come to a conclusion, and then they go and do that. We're born this way, apparently.
I think so. I think so. But not to say that I haven't had my share of epiphanies and hard
Oh
lefts
yes.
on the turn. I've been navigating this meandering journey of life just like everybody else. But I think that I did always have a sense that it was very much being created by me step by step. So I continue to believe that.
Fairly recently, I had a conversation with a couple of people, and I basically said, especially if you're a woman, almost every woman I've ever met has had bad moments in their life, things that have happened to them, and traumas and that kind of thing. And one of them said, I don't want anybody to know that I've had this trauma. But my point was that it's almost like everybody goes through that at one point or another. And it's how you come out the other side, how you deal with the experiences that you had to deal with, that mostly were none of your own making. And to be able to live the life that you are living now. you yeah, are you proud of yourself? You must be.
Yes, of course. And I'm also proud of my past selves. I think about myself as all of these iterations of me, sort of backwards and forward through time. And sometimes when I'm doing some of my personal work and I'm having a big breakthrough in a personal sense, I'll look back at the self I was 10, 20, 40 years ago, and I'll be grateful to her because she endured something that brought me here, and she taught me things that maybe I couldn't have seen until this exact moment. And so I feel like it's an integration process of all those selves, and yeah, certainly so proud.
Well, and I believe that that is actually the way it works, is that we come here, and I believe that we're all born great. And then in our early years, a lot of people spend a lot of time telling us we ain't so great. And that we've got problems, and we're either too tall or too short or too fat or too this or too that. And so there comes a point in time when you have to really work through that, understand it, and then bust through in a real positive way. But sometimes it's very hard for people to break out of that. And that's why it's important for people to come and see you, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is very hard. Some layers are harder than others. And when I talk about trauma healing, I talk about how healing has to happen in layers because our system presents us with material that we're ready to heal. And so if we work with what we feel ready to heal and ready to face, then eventually we'll be able to work down through those layers to the really tough core stuff. And sometimes those layers need to repeat. So I'll have a client who will say to me, why is it always about mom? When's it going to stop being about mom? And what I would tell this client is it's going to be about mom until you achieve a certain level of healing where you realize that mom, she really wasn't the issue after all. And it's back to self-love and it's back to growth. And the teacher that was mom for all those layers is complete. And you can have gratitude for all the lessons you learn from those difficult layers and you can move on from them.
I have to say, if you're living, well, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're living today, and you are awfully lucky to be living in this particular time frame. Because if you lived in another time frame, like my mother-in-law, who was born in 1930, she was adopted. Well, she carried the fact that she was adopted her entire life. And it became a point of contention with her, and to the point of nobody loves me, nobody cares. My family, my adoptive family, that even though they tried to love me, they didn't, and they because I wasn't their blood. And so she created this whole story around that. Whereas if she lived a little bit later and she could have met someone like you, she may have been able to work through that, get to the actual root of the problem,
Yeah.
because she never was willing to address it. And that's what I think that a lot of people are getting to now, is we're willing to address the root of the problem so that we can get through it, so that we can live the life that we were destined to live.
Yes. Yeah, I think we all have core wounds. Being a human is hard. And I think that's part of why we're here. I think growth and learning doesn't really happen when things are easy breezy. So if you can hold a mindset that you welcome the challenges, even the traumas, because in the greater scheme of your experience, that's where you're going to really evolve, then I think it has a totally different approach toward those difficult times. And something that's changed right now in the therapy world, the personal growth world, is that trauma isn't seen as such a pathology as it used to be. It's not something that is laced in shame or guilt. It's actually become quite normalized that it is really hard to be a human being. We do have really hard experiences, and it's in the healing of those experiences that we can live our full potential. So I really appreciate the non pathologizing approach to this kind of work, because it allows there to be a sense of collective humanity where we're all just in this together, doing the best we can, and maybe we should show up for each other.
I couldn't have said that better myself. That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. I've talked to some really interesting people, Gary Zukoff for one, Neil Donald Walsh. Both of those fine gentlemen are coming on my show later in the month, and I'll let everybody know when that's happening. But they will tell you that, and as will Dr. Michael Noonan and a lot of folks that are familiar with what it's like for us on the other side, a
Mhm.
place of absolute love, and we are all perfect together there. And then we come here, and we're not ready for, in many cases, how difficult a life it can be here, because there everybody loves everybody. Here ain't not so much. And people are kind. In here, not so much. And there are people that are so a lot of us get stuck in the fact that this isn't what I was expecting, and this is not good. I don't like this very much. And so they don't know how to get out of it. And so they end up making stories and telling themselves stories about why it's this way, and it's their fault, and it's this thing, and it's that group, and it's this, rather than looking within and taking a deep dive into yourself so that you can come through the other side. Your work, you help people do that, don't you?
Yes. Yeah, and speaking of the other side and how good it feels there compared to here, I think when we do come here, we are ready on an essential level, but we forget. There's a form of amnesia that happens, and that's really important, because the process of remembering this essential self, I call it the inner pilot light, because we all have it and it's burning for our whole lives, and it can burn pretty dim, or it can really roar with brilliance depending on how we're treating ourselves and how we're living our life. So once you can remember that you have that essential self, that inner pilot light that did kind of sign up for this, and for very good reason, and you are here because you're supposed to be, and you're facing what you're facing because this is a giant classroom, and the best way through is to face it head on, then it becomes like an adventure, and it's not so threatening and scary all the time, and feels very meaningful. Human beings are meaning makers, which is really, I think, one of our gifts as a collective.
It can become the adventure of a lifetime, but it can also become a nightmare of a lifetime if you will allow that. It's really is interesting, and for people that are saying, I don't get what you guys are talking about and stuff. It is part of our nature to kind of poo-poo who we really are. But if we can remember that, and sometimes it takes hypnotherapy, sometimes it takes a deep dive by a coach or somebody that really cares about you and can start talking to you in terms that you don't even talk to yourself. Because a lot of times we don't tell ourselves the truth either, do we?
Yeah, I think when we lie to ourselves, it's sort of the biggest trick of all, because what's the point if you're not being honest with yourself? If you're hiding in denial or avoidance, it doesn't help you to shove something under the rug. It only prolongs the pain. And like they teach in Buddhist philosophy, it's all about, understanding that pain and suffering is part of this experience. And we shouldn't grip so tightly to avoiding it. Instead, we should surrender. We should allow ourselves to embody the human experience and face it as though it's meaningful and it's important for us, even if it's uncomfortable.
We're talking with Kate King. Go to her website, which is theradiantlifeproject.com. She's an extraordinary human being. We need to take a really quick break. It's only 30 seconds. We'll be right back. But Kate, I got to tell you, I'm having a wonderful time talking to you. So thank you for coming on the show, and we'll be right back.
They have your eyes. They have your ears. They have your smile. Now all they need is a little more of your time. Make a difference in your child's life, because anyone can be a father. It takes time to be a dad.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. You're with me and Kate King. She is a radiant life coach. I had never heard that term until I got a chance to talk to you, a radiant life coach. I think that is awesome. Did that come to you as a bit of a, well, first of all, I had this thought. Everybody that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of people, and they all have the same philosophy. Now, you haven't met all these people. You've developed your philosophies independently of the philosophies that a lot of other people have developed, but they're all the same. They're all very similar. So to me, that means unless there's a huge conspiracy going around, that it's just part of the way it is, and it's how to get through it. Do you feel like this is something that you can share with a lot of people, and that a lot of people believe the same things that you do?
I do think so. I think that it's like you're tapping into the same truth. And it feels like the truth to so many different people, different walks of life, different industries, different socioeconomics, different cultures, because truth has a certain resonance, feels a certain way when you hear it, it feels a certain way when you practice it. And in contrast, mistruths or untruths feel really different. They feel, really abrasive and against the grain. And so I think that when there's a whole collective that have never met each other and they're all sort of teaching the same flavor, it's because they're tapped into that resonance of truth.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm really excited about the future. I know it doesn't appear that we should be excited about the future, but I am. Are you?
I am. Yes. I was actually having a conversation with someone this week who was saying they weren't sure if they wanted to bring a child into this world. They were thinking of getting pregnant, and they said, I just don't know. It's such a terrible place. Why would I bring a child into this world? And my answer was, you should bring a child into this world because they're going to make it better, because it'll be a whole nother generation with potential and with awareness, and they will bring gifts in their generation that our generations haven't been able to bring forth yet. So we got to continue this as long as the earth will have us. We have to keep trying to make it a better place and shine the light. And I think future generations will do that. So yes, I'm excited about the future. Absolutely.
Now, I know that you have a couple of children yourself.
Hmm.
And first of all, I want to apologize to them because we've screwed up their world, and they're going to be the ones that are going to have to fix it.
Yeah, they're going to get to fix it. It'll be their privilege.
Exactly. But I've also was a bus driver for 12 years, and what I've learned in looking at children and the new generations that are coming up, they don't have the same hangups that the older folks do. And I was on the bus, and there were three girls, and they were talking about a boy, always, and they were teenagers, and they were talking about not whether he was black or white. They were talking about he's got a great color skin. What is his heritage? And so they could go back and, well, he's part Filipino and he's part Indian and he's part white and he's part, and they look at it in a completely different viewpoint. They don't look at it like he is different. He is the other. He's like one of them, and only he's got a beautiful complexion. So I just find it interesting how, as we continue to evolve on the planet, that's why I make a joke, and it's kind of an irreverent joke, but it's like there's a reason why we get old and die, because our thought processes are no longer relevant to what needs to be happening in the future. And so if people didn't get old and die, nothing would change. But because those change, new people come up, there's new philosophies, there's new ways of being and of looking at things. And that's how change happens, don't you think?
Yes, I think that's beautiful wisdom. And I think it's evolution in process. So we can actually see our species evolving, getting better, weeding out what doesn't work, increasing what does work. And we see that by how much more compassionate our children are, or how much healthier we are able to parent our children than our parents were able to parent us. And that delves into the realms of epigenetics and ancestral healing, which I think is incredibly powerful work. But yes, I think with every generation we get better.
Let's talk about, you just struck on something, generational healing, or is that what you called it?
Intergenerational healing.
That's it. Yes. What is that?
It is essentially a lineage is the different generations within the same family, and it creates sort of a long chain of people. And there are certain things that get passed down through that chain that are related to our DNA. Clearly, we know that if your parent has a gene for some kind of cancer, you might be more likely to have that kind of cancer. But what we're learning now through the science of epigenetics is that your genes are not necessarily set in stone. And even if you have the gene for a certain type of cancer, it may never manifest inside of you if you are mindful about your lifestyle choices, your diet, the types of relationships you have, the emotional material you repress or express, the amount of healing you do. And so, like this can happen with physical ailments like cancer and Alzheimer's, it can also happen with trauma. And so, intergenerational trauma is when something that happened to your grandmother trickles down into her daughter and trickles down into her daughter, because we're all connected. Because when your grandmother was 5 months pregnant with your mother, you were present in the eggs of your fetal mother. And so if your grandmother was exposed to environmental toxins or trauma or severe depression, all of that trickled down to your mother, and in trace elements trickle down to you too. So that's how we have different predispositions, but we don't necessarily have to live them out. And by not living them out, the only thing we need to do is just do things differently than the people who came before us. So even if you are predisposed to something like depression or cancer, if you look at it differently than the generations before you, if you handle it in different ways, if you're courageous and you do the inner work, if you relate differently to people in your life, then you may be free of those ailments. And when you end those things, you don't pass them down to your descendants, which is really the beauty of being a cycle breaker.
Is that, in my terminology, I would call that the 7 generation cycle.
Yes. Yes,
Which
backward and forward.
Yes, because and if you are curious as to what that means, as an example, if your great 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 grandfather or was abused as a child, and he grew up, and that's what he knew, so the abused became the abuser, and then he abused the next generation, and so forth and so on, in some degree, manner, or form, unless there is somebody who breaks that cycle. and eliminates that from the DNA, it will continue forever. And so that's what I believe that we are here to do, is to break that generational cycle so that we can all live better. And you said it again, which is we're all one, and we're all part of the same genetic code, the same family. We're all the same. And we really need to start taking this a lot more seriously than we have in the past.
Yes, I think people forget how much power they have, that you are sure you may be, if you think of a line of Christmas lights, you may just be one of those lights along the line of your lineage, but also you are one of those lights. Like the line would be different without you. And because of you, there's going to be lights that come after you. And even if you yourself don't reproduce, there's somebody in your family line who probably will, save, for an apocalypse. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But your family line is basically sharing and spreading all of its experiences, all of its genetic predispositions, all the heritable traits forward in time. And you are very powerful in deciding if that gets to continue or if it needs a little pivot or a major pivot. And so when it comes to trauma, there can be some major pivots that people do by doing their own healing work and deciding, this ends with me. I am not passing this on. And my children are going to have different issues, of course, but they're not going to have these issues.
That's a very important thing. By the way, I don't even know if it still works this way. But years ago, if you bought a string of Christmas lights and one of the lights was burned out, the entire thing would now operate.
Yeah.
And so you had to go and find out which one was broken and then replace it. I think that we operate in very much the same way. When we have one of us that is out and is broken and stuff, it affects all the other lights, everybody else in the chain.
Absolutely. And the chain can think that it's normal to have the lights out. If that's all they've experienced, if you've grown up in a family that's been deeply dysfunctional or steeped in trauma, that's your experience of normal. And so if you're perpetuating that, thinking it's normal, and then one day you realize, oh, wow, my friend has this family system and their lights aren't all out, maybe this isn't normal. That's the moment where you're like given this opportunity to say, is there something that I've been believing my entire life that I might need to rethink, that I can empower myself to change, and to change not only for myself, but for the future of this lineage? And it starts with just a little insight like that. And then it can snowball into a huge amount of healing for the whole lineage, backwards and forwards, because when you don't pass it forwards, your descendants don't suffer from the same thing. But also, I think in a spiritual sense, your ancestors are rooting for you to break these patterns that they themselves didn't break. And so I think that it does healing on a spiritual level, energetically backwards too, even for the people who are no longer here.
I couldn't agree more. And you are sensational. By the way, we're talking with Kate King. We need to take a station break. And when we come back, one of the things that she's also very versed in is working with people who have either experienced or thought about experiencing suicide. And I want to touch on that real briefly because we're all very important pieces here on Earth. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back, everybody, to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald on the Brushwood Media Network. And I got to tell you, Kate, some of the PSAs that they've given me to be able to run, I really enjoy them because I think that they have meaning, and they can really, like Covenant House and learning how to be a good father or a good dad rather than just a father, and some of the others that we play. And I really think that we have the ability as human beings to really rise above the occasion. But a lot of times it takes somebody that that we can really go and work with, who can help us understand that they can do it too. If you can do it, if I can, good Lord, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So it's really is important, and I want to thank you for who you are.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. Thank you for who you are as well.
Well, thank you. It's because you are a shining light for humanity. And I don't want to overstate that. I don't know that I can overstate that, because what you do is, in the way that you operate in talking to people, the energy that you're giving off to other people, people go, there was movie when Harry met Sally, and they were I don't know if you remember that movie.
I love that movie.
When they're in the cafeteria, and she's talking about, faking it, as it were, and he just said, you can't, and so she did, and it was very convincing, and a lady down the row said, I want what she's having.
I remember. Yeah.
And that is how people come across you, I think, is they go, I want what she's got, because her life is different than mine, fundamentally. Do you agree with that?
Thank you. Yeah, I think so. And I think the people who are walking around with really bright lights and trying to shed that light into the world, they may have been born that way, but more likely they were born just, like everybody else, is just a baby in the nursery. And they activated that light by facing life head on with curiosity and willingness, and learned a lot along the way that felt valuable to share. And so I think for the people who seem like, maybe it's easy, if the bright lights in the world haven't had any problems, life's just been really easy for them, I would say it might actually be the opposite. And the light that you're seeing is the resiliency and the courage that that person has taken as they've walked through their life and just refused to give up and gotten really passionate about sharing what they've learned.
Well, I think we all have what I call my bad country music song period. My dad died, my dog died, my wife left, I lost my house, and a series of events like that. But one of the things that some people were like, I can't believe that you're actually doing that. I drove a bus for 12 years in Seattle. And what I learned from that, I believe that every experience that we have, every job that we take, every interaction that we have is designed for our betterment, and so that we can learn who we really are and understand more of how it works. And one of the things that I learned about being a bus driver is I drove the 60-foot, articulated things, and I could have as many as 60, 70 people on the bus at any given time. My attitude and my energy and my vibration could affect everybody on the bus in either a very positive way or a very negative way, and I got to choose what that was going to be.
Yes. Isn't that amazing?
It really was. Because I just noticed it one day. It was like I was in a good mood, and I generally am in a good mood, even when I'm driving a bus. And anyway, there's a whole story there. But when you approach life from a positive viewpoint, where the grocery clerk is not just another person, it is a human being who you can say hello to, that you can smile to. If anybody that you meet, you can actually change the vibration of the planet by who we get to talk to, and by how we interact with our fellow human beings. Do you agree with that? I bet you do.
I do, absolutely. I think it's really powerful personally, and I think it's also been proven scientifically that when like-minded people come together with a shared intention, collectively, the amount of change that group prayer can make. Or I was just reading a study from 1993 in Washington, D.C., where up to 7,000 people came together in meditation over a period of time. And in the most crime riddled season of the year, which is the summer in Washington, D.C., they had a huge decrease in crime because all of these meditators collectively held the intention of lowering the crime rate in Washington, D.C. And it was measurable. And the chances of it happening by chance or sort of just coincidentally was so microfractional that it was hard to dispute that the group meditation wasn't actually the cause of the decrease of crime. So it starts with you. And then when you find aligned connection and community, it grows and the intention has such an emanating effect. And it's really powerful. It can change the whole world.
Well, and right now, because coming post COVID, even though it's not really all that post COVID, because people are still getting sick, um, people have been lonely and they are distant from one another. And it is important that we form communities
Yes.
of like-minded people so that we can all work together and also be there to support each other. And one of the things that I know that you do is that you work with people who have either thought about suicide or contemplating it and that sort of thing. Tell me about that work a little bit.
Yes. So I am an assist suicide trained officer. And so I've been trained to kind of understand some of the thinking, the intentionality, and the execution of the way that people approach suicide, whether it's just in their thoughts or in their actions. And I really like working with that population, honestly, because I find that, in fact, those are people who are really heartfelt and have capacity for really broad existential thinking. They're usually very sensitive. And I think that's a trait that we're so missing these days, at least in Western culture. I think sensitivity is such a gift. And so I think it's a really interesting kind of paradox when somebody gets into a suicidal mindset, because I don't think that they actually want to end their life. They just want to end their suffering, and they don't understand how the two aren't the same. And so it can be a really fruitful process to speak to someone in that place about really teasing apart the difference between a bad life that's not worth living and factors of life that are causing suffering, but that, like my middle school PE teacher, Ruth Harris, used to say to me, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So she would teach that in middle school because middle schoolers need to hear that. And it's an angsty time of life. And I brought that wisdom with me all the way through life now into my clinical practice. And I remind people that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I think it's a process of really teasing apart meaning and figuring out, what do you care about? What are you trying to escape from? And is there maybe a different way to go about it that will let you stay here embodied on this planet until your clock naturally is done ticking? And you can maybe turn this experience into wisdom. And I have one client who I'm thinking of who had a failed suicide attempt years ago, probably about 15 years ago. And I still talk to him to this day. And he tells me that it was the best thing that ever happened to him, that he tried and failed at that attempt, because it was a huge wake up call. And now he's working on being approved for a TED Talk where he can share his journey and teach people what he learned about coming back to life from near death and almost making a decision that he now just can't really wrap his mind around why he thought that was the answer. But he has compassion for that self back then who thought that that was all he could do with his sadness and grief. And he's learned a lot now that he's turned into offerings for other people. So I think there's a lot of gifts in that type of suffering.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I've witnessed a couple of suicides, and what I found was they did not recognize. They were so deeply in grief. One had to do with his wife and an affair and things, but he was so deeply in grief that he did not realize how many people loved him.
Mm.
So after the the deed was done, as it were, um, I went because I walked up and found him, um, and we went to his house, and 3 generations of people were all crying, and there were like 20, 25 people there. He had a huge family of people that loved him and cared for him. He didn't recognize that, and I'm glad that you're there to help people. And I want to share this with people as well. There's a number that's relatively new. It's called 988, and that is a national hotline. And if you are feeling less than, if you are feeling like you have nothing to live for, number one, you're wrong. And number two, use that use that lifeline, which is 988. And you'd be amazed how many people will come a running to help you get through this issue, because it's a temporary issue and you don't want to create a permanent solution, just like you said. Okay. Thank you for letting me say that.
Yes, of course.
I love the work that you're doing, and you're going to have to come back, because there's not enough time to talk to you about everything that you do.
I would love that so much. Talking to you is great fun.
What else do you do? Let's see, you're a mom, you're a wife, you've got your own business, you're a therapist, you do all kinds of stuff. What else do you do?
What else do I do? Well, right now my focus is on writing helpful books that can teach a lot of the things that I've learned in my life. Because I reached a point in my private practice during the pandemic, actually, where I was really struck with the idea that I just can't reach enough people one-on-one in my practice alone. And so I started writing, and the intention is that these books can go far and wide, and they might be able to provide the guiding light that people need to initiate this work, or to continue it, or to share it. And so I have a book that's out now called The Radiant Life Project. I'm working on another one as we speak that's geared toward relationships of all kinds, not just romantic. And I have so many more ideas for books about creativity, books about spirituality, books about authenticity. I just can keep going and going. So I'm really into the writing right now. And I've also expanded my work to include retreats, which has been really fun. It's really beautiful to bring people in aligned community together to do this work. It's so powerful. And I'm just amazed by the people who come to these retreats. So a lot of that. Also just trying to take care of myself along the way, because I do know what burnout feels like. I've been there, done that, not going back. So I spend a lot of time in nature. I spend a lot of time with my family. I have an active art making process, because I was taught by a teacher in grad school that being an art therapist means continuing to be a creative person in your own time. So a lot of art making, a lot of reading, a lot of writing, and I love skiing. So I do a lot of things.
Well, you're going to need to move to a place where skiing is good, like, I don't know, Colorado or something.
I'm already there.
I know. And I'm looking at the Radiant Life Project, and I just love this. Awaken your purpose, heal your past, transform your future. Those are all key ingredients to, number one, understand what your purpose is. And all you have to do, if in my world, tell me if this works for you and your world. In my world, I had a point in time when I was like, why am I here? What am I here to do? And so I looked up at my guides. I firmly believe I've got guardian angels and guides and ancestors and people on the other side. And I said, okay, I'm game. Tell me why I'm here and what am I supposed to be doing with this life to make it better? And it was like, on the other side, they were like, finally, he is giving us permission. So now let's go plan. So then they planned out the next 20 years of my life, which has led to this interview with you.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that ripple effect that can happen. And sometimes, really, you just have to ask the question. You just have to open your mind and open your heart and let yourself be guided.
And sometimes when you do that, it can be a little unpleasant. When we come back from this break, I'm going to tell you a story of, of how come I quit driving a bus and started doing 5 to 7 podcasts and radio shows a week. Again, we're talking with Kate King, and go to her website, which is again theradiantproject.com, and we will be right back after this quick break again. And this is, I'm a little older now, I'm a little long in the tooth, and this commercial is for all of us that are a little older.
A lifetime of savings can disappear overnight. Millions of dollars are stolen every day from unsuspecting older adults by family members, caregivers, and trusted professionals. If you suspect financial exploitation, call the Elder Care Locator at 1-800-677-1116 or go online to the National Adult Protective Services Association to be connected with help in your area.
See, that wasn't bad. That was just a little one. So I want to thank Kate King for being here. And we were talking about, or I was talking about, be careful what you wish for, because you might get it, but it might not be exactly the way you expect it to show up. I was driving a bus, and a series of events happened that I was able to move in to where I live now, so that I was setting up for my retirement so that I could do a bunch of podcasts and stuff. And I said, basically, I would like to be able to do that now. And so as I was moving in, and there's a stairs in the front of my place, and I fell on the stairs and tore my rotator cuff off. And so I had to have surgery to fix that. And then a couple of months later, I tripped over my son's brand new Labrador Retriever and tore up the other arm and had to have surgery on that. So I was no longer, it was funny. I was in the emergency room. I had one arm had a splint on it, and the other arm was, and they said, how are you going to walk this way? And I said, because I'd fall again. Anyway, but I was able to retire, and then was able to do this because this is what I've been called to do. And so I want to thank the universe and thank everybody involved. And now I can do this, and I get a chance to talk to you. But that's how it happens sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes if you won't stop using your hands, the universe will take their capabilities away for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then make you learn to do something different.
Yes. Something more aligned, something that you actually want to do and can fill with your passions.
How do you help people find their purpose?
Sometimes it's very easy to start with what's not working in their lives. And people are really quick to be able to identify what's not feeling aligned. And sometimes people do have a sense for their purpose. They just don't necessarily know how to connect the dots and bring it out of themselves. So creating art can be one really powerful way to sort of activate some of that expression and that exploration and curiosity, because art in and of itself, this is just a process, and it's very creative. And sometimes you get downloads through your art that really surprise you. And other times, people who aren't interested in art, really just having conversations. And if it's the type of person who is clear about what's not working, what they know for sure is not their purpose, then that creates a really beautiful contrast where they know the shadow side of things, and then we get to excavate the light. And so it's sort of like how do you feel about this? And does that feel good? It's an experimentation process that they already know what something that doesn't feel good feels like. And so we know what we're not aiming for, but everything else is fair game. And I think that can be a really freeing process for people, because it's not so limited, but it is exclusionary of the things that you're sure aren't a fit. And that can be really liberating for people too.
Absolutely. And if I could add one thing to that, that would be, I had a friend tell me one time when I was in the middle of my search, he said, I want you to go to a metaphysical bookstore, and I want you to buy the first book that speaks to you. And I said, what speaks to me? I didn't have any idea what that meant, but I went to the bookstore and there was a in the end cap was this book that I'd been dying to read about this particular subject, which was life between lives and past lives and that sort of thing. And it was by Dr. Michael Newton. So I bought it, and that really solidified a lot of things for me and changed my life. And led me. And so the universe will take care of you if you open up to it. I firmly believe that.
Yes. That sort of cliche now statement of trust the process is really fitting. If we can just trust that there is a flow, and as long as we don't resist it, we are in it. And to trust that it's leading us somewhere, even if we can't see where, and even if we don't know how, it gives us a little bit of freedom from feeling like you have to have it all figured out. And I will say that I don't think that everyone has just one purpose. So you may have a purpose that feels really solid for a time of your life, and then it might be time to shift to a new purpose at a different time when you have different experience or new wisdom to incorporate. And I think that's part of the process too.
You use my favorite word in the English language, and that is trust.
Trust.
If you can trust in things, and the other thing is, I call it the 50,000 foot view, and we don't get the 50,000 foot view. And what I mean by that is, if you look at a drone or look at a helicopter that's way up in the sky, they can see, and they see you. They can see where you've been, where you're going, and how to get to where you want to go. We don't get that. We get to look at the tree in front of us and the tree behind us. So we have to keep going. We have to keep walking, and we have to trust. And then we get off track, and we get nudged back on track, and as we continue to move forward. Do you think that's a decent analogy?
Yes, I love that so much. It's the bird's eye view. And unless you're the bird, it's hard to know what's too far ahead, but you do know what's present, and you do know what you've been through. So I think those can inform how you move forward.
And there are people on the other side who love you, care for you, and they're going to help you. And that's what they're there for. We've been talking again with Kate King. The radiantlifeproject.com. Please go there. She's just awesome. And we've got just about a minute and a half. I want you to tell our audience anything that's on your heart to say.
Oh, I love that you're listening to this, that you're watching this. I think that your own interest in your growth and your healing and impacting the world for the better originates within you, but it ripples out beyond you too. And you have the power not only to improve your own life and your circumstances, but to really make a difference in your family and in your cultures and societies and even the world at large. So this work is really meaningful and special, and your participation in it is essential. So I just want to encourage everyone to keep going, keep moving towards the light.
I love that. And keep moving towards the light. That's a bumper sticker right there. So you can make $1 million with that bumper sticker all by itself.
Perfect. Let's do it.
And have you started on your next book yet?
Yes, I actually have a complete manuscript, and I'm going to start shopping it around to publishers pretty soon. So there will be a relationship book out sooner or later. But for now, the Radiant Life Project is the one that's out on bookshelves and starting to make its impact.
When that book gets closer, will you come back on my show?
Oh, I would love to. Absolutely.
You are incredible, and I want to thank you so much for being here. Again, Kate King has been our guest. The radiantlifeproject.com. Please go there. Buy the book from her, for heaven's sakes. So I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope everybody else does too, and thank you for listening. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We are a production of kmmedia.pro. A full-service media company. Whether it is audio, video, shorts, or longer pieces, we're able to take each project from beginning to final product within your time frame and on budget. Visit kmmedia.pro for more details about us and to get started on your project. We also would like to thank the Brushwood Media Network for all their support. Go to brushwoodmedianetwork.com to find out more about them and the quality shows featured on the network. Until then, we'll see you next time. My name again is Kevin McDonald, and please remember, be kind to one another because each other